Welcome to the Anywhere School stop in Europe and the Middle East. My name's Liz Sproat and I'm joining you here from London in my new working space, my living room. I want to say thank you to everyone from around the world that's joining us and to reflect for a moment on just how much this community has been vital in helping to keep learning happening. Over the weekend, I was reflecting on what COVID-19 would have been like if we didn't have technology. I was transported back to my younger self. I grew up in a rural community in the northwest of England, and here I am, aged 10, and I'm 3 weeks into the long awaited summer holiday that lasts about 6 weeks. Now, it's important to remember that this was very much an analog world. So if I wanted to watch a television program, I had to check the schedule and be there on time, otherwise, I'd miss my favorite show. So quite different from the world we occupy now. So there I am, 3 weeks in, I'm sitting on the kitchen floor and I utter those words that parents and guardians really, really dread. I'm bored. Technology back then was inaccessible, clunky, and really expensive. One thing is for sure though, COVID-19 may be described as many things, but boring is not one of them. It brought about a crisis in education. Before COVID-19, technology use was absolutely there, but perhaps a little sporadic and definitely not systemic. COVID-19 made technology vital. My sister, a secondary maths teacher, shared with me her concerns about fear of failure when using technology. She was terrified about running a video conference with her group of bottom set GCSE maths pupils. She'd really just never done it before. She didn't want it to go wrong. But like many other teachers, she succeeded. And I know that there are tons of examples of this, of teachers going above and beyond and outside of their comfort zone to help make sure that learning continues to happen. The team at Google have seen unprecedented growth through this period, and there's hardly a country in our region where one of the team members hasn't been active in trying to help that country get up and running with our tools and resources. And I know I share my colleagues' view in sharing that it was incredibly humbling and rewarding to play even that small role in helping keeping learning happening. As we enter the new school term, it's likely that the problems that beset us at the beginning of the crisis will continue. Issues like, how do we ensure access to technology is equitable? What's the role of parents and guardians in teaching and learning? And crucially, how do we give teachers greater confidence in their use of technology? Through today's sessions, you're going to hear from your colleagues from across the region on these very topics. But for now, I'd like to pause and say a huge thank you to everything you have done and will do to help keep learning happening in your schools. Thank you. I very much hope you enjoy the European and Middle East stop of this Anywhere School. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to our first speaker, Anneli Rautiainen. She is the head of the Innovation Unit at the Finnish National Agency for Education, and she's going to speak in a fireside chat about innovation and creativity in the time of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz, and welcome everybody to this next session. I'm delighted to be joined by Anneli Rautiainen, who is the head of the Innovation Centre at the Finnish National Agency for Education. Anneli, it's so good to be chatting to you here today, albeit not in person, as is the new normal. And so I guess the first question to ask is, how are you? How are you doing?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very well, thank you. I've had a wonderful holiday out in the countryside of Finland by the lake, and it felt especially good after this extraordinary spring that we have left behind.
Nice, that sounds amazing. I'm a bit jealous of your break. I have one coming up soon, so I'm looking forward to it. Now, I mentioned that you're the head of the Innovation Centre. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and what your team does there?
We're trying to solve the question, what is a sustainable education system in Finland in the future? And we're encouraging the schools, the teachers, the students, and the principals to start experimenting when they solve their local problems concerning well being or learning or technology or whatever their wicked problems are. And we're trying to implement co-development and iterative development into education system at all levels, also in administration.
We are still in the midst of a global pandemic where every country has had its own approach. In Finland, it was the 18th of March when the government announced that all schools would be closed. Can you give us an insight into what was going through your mind at that point in time?
I think we were all very shocked because we had never experienced anything like that in the past. And I think then we quickly thought that we have to start acting on and make sure that learning continues and provide schools help with the situation and give guidance and support to schools and administrators locally as well. But yeah, very shocking at first. But then we saw that our excellent teachers started to work despite the closing of schools and succeeded slowly very well, in fact.
You began to touch on it there, but this is probably the most difficult part of any teacher's career so far, these last few months. Could you tell us a bit more about how teachers approached this and the role technology played in that?
Well, the teachers came together very quickly and started to share resources and knowledge and materials with each other. And I think they found each other also through social media and supported each other's work there. And of course, the teacher networks helped the teachers a lot also, and each school as a learning community. So the principals got the teachers together and they were able to share their practices and also their difficulties and help one another. So I think also our tutor teachers that nearly every school has also supported their colleagues in a new way to support the use of technology because of course the the amount of devices in technology and the pedagogical use of it varies from one school to another and from one teacher to another. So I think by doing this they did a tremendous job taking a digital leap, so to speak, and they were helping each other to accelerate quickly.
You mentioned their tutor teachers, and I really, really like this model. Could you just give us a quick overview of what a tutor teacher is?
The tutor teacher is a regular teacher, could be a class teacher or a subject teacher that teaches maybe 4 days a week in class with the student and is available for 1 day a week to support his or her colleagues in technology, in the use of technology, and also in pedagogy. And it's been a very successful way, and the teachers have given a very good feedback on that. The government has supported it with funding.
I think it's a great idea, and we learn best from our peers who understand the very specific context that we're in. You mentioned there are different levels of technology, device availability, and the use of technology per school. And understanding those details, I think, is really important for the people that then train the teachers in those schools. You mentioned that teachers started sharing together as well. They found each other on social media, for example. What role did technology start to play in teaching and learning when that was being delivered remotely? Did you see a single approach or were there multiple approaches?
As Finnish teachers are very autonomous, there were multiple approaches, and I think it's a richness that this happens. And I think we basically saw a quick accelerating in the skills by the help of colleagues and also by the help of students, because sometimes they are capable of teaching the teachers even how to use technology. But they were starting to use more like student-centered ways of learning slowly. If they were giving an assignment first to the students from the textbook, for example, it was natural to get started from that. But pretty soon they were able to kind of concentrate on learning instead of teaching. And they were heading towards self-directed, self even selected learning with the students. And I think students began to learn from and with each other, not only alone.
And through all of this, like anywhere, there are some teachers who are maybe more reluctant to embrace technology or haven't had the opportunities to use it so far. Do you think this use of technology that you've seen, particularly around the student centered learning, will continue now that we're heading into the new academic year and where things are maybe becoming a bit more normal and students are back in school?
I certainly hope so. I think we're heading towards blended learning that we've talked about for a long time, but now we have to practice it also. So I think technology will play a key role in learning, even more so than before. And I think we need to stop and sit and pick up the findings and learnings that we discovered. What did we learn? And still keep sharing the best practices, and also be encouraged to uh, kind of try. Even if we fail, we learn from it and then we try again. And so I think it will probably be easier now to go back to school. And of course, we hope that things go well, that we don't have to close the schools again.
And you touched on this student centered learning and even student selected learning. That's something that you've been working towards anyway before this pandemic. So, do you think that this has just accelerated the progress that you've made in that area?
I think so, because many students seem to even thrive when they were studying at home or online. And it seemed like for some students who were experiencing mobbing at school or had difficulties maybe concentrating, did better at home. So I think we have many good examples where student-centered learning can really support some learners better. And of course, then we need to see what is the right methodology in each for each child and for each topic and content, and so we still want the teachers to use multiple ways of teaching and learning, but to make it more student centered is important.
It's really interesting that you mentioned there how some students who were maybe less engaged at school were more engaged actually when they had a bit more ownership about the time that they took part in their learning and so on from home. Do you think you also see examples the other way around, where actually some of the students that thrived at school maybe struggled a bit more with working from home?
I think we all discovered multiple ways of learning, and we're brave enough to discover something that we haven't tried before. But I think we still have some concerns about well-being of students. Were we able to support every student as if they were in school? So we still have work to do in that sense.
And since we're talking about being at home and students working differently in the environments that they're in, how did the parents cope with this? Do you think they were mainly on board? Did they also struggle?
Well, it was difficult for some parents because they had to work from home and make sure that their children were studying and helping them. So it was an overload for them. Whereas then, of course, in some families, maybe there weren't anyone who could help them. So the teacher's role became more important again. And overall, I think the parents learned to respect the teachers a bit more. And I think also the teachers we're able to see how a child studies at home with the parents. It increased the communication, and I think I heard a lot of good comments about our teachers from the parents during that time. And I think the teachers have always been highly respected in Finland, but maybe if we think about it now, even more so after this COVID.
I really like that teachers got this insight that they wouldn't normally get. All of a sudden, we actually found out how the students do work at home and approach things at home, or the support that they get at home. And so it kind of gave us this extra insight. And it'll be really interesting to see how that continues over time and whether the increased communication is able to carry on even once things are back to normal.
Yeah, I think it will build the trust even deeper if we can do that and take the time to communicate and also communicate timely about things. Not always when it's almost too late.
So you've seen a lot happen through this period and also in all of the work that you've done so far in the Innovation Center. There'll be a lot of different types of people watching this session today, from teachers to school leaders and municipality or government level education leaders. Is there one piece of advice that you have for those different audiences, or one thing that you think they should really be focused on as we enter this new academic year?
Well, I think the advice is to do things collaboratively and innovatively. You know, to be brave enough to innovate, but to do it together. And like a teacher's profession has been a lonely profession for a long time. And schools need to be learning communities where teachers co-teach together. And also, we at the administration, we have to support the schools and the local authorities so that they can succeed in their work. And we have to be brave enough also to start experimenting, because the wicked problems that we face in this world will not end. Unfortunately, I'm afraid so. And no one can solve these problems alone anymore. So we need collaborative approaches to experiment and see what works and what doesn't work, and then try again to be more iterative, more fast paced in our development. We should never stop developing. We have to keep going and make things better all the time.
You mentioned there about experimenting and trying new things, and you have lots of experience of doing that at the Innovation Center. What's the main thing if I am a school leader and I want to experiment just at my level in my school? How do I start? I think some people are maybe reluctant because they feel like they could, it could be to the detriment of a student's learning, for example, to try something new with them. So, have you got any advice for people maybe thinking about doing something like that?
I think you should take time to stop and find a problem that you want to solve and spend enough time defining the problem together with students, with parents, with teachers, with principals, administration. Once you found the problem, you can see what kind of experiments, small experiments you can do to see if it works. And these problems are wicked, but we still have to take small steps to solve them. And so you need to do a collaborative approach and get rid of the hierarchical system a little bit and a lot in the end, so that you can co-develop together.
Thank you so much for your time today, Annalie. It's been great chatting to you and finding out more about the approach to teaching and learning from home in Finland. Are there any last pieces of advice or words that you'd like to share with everyone that's watching today?
I think we all are learners for lifelong. So I hope we keep learning also from the experiences that are not so pleasant, because by doing that we can discover something very valuable. And we're all human beings, and we keep growing as human beings and as citizens. And I hope that we never lose hope.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, and what a poignant note to end on as well. Thanks everyone for joining the session, and enjoy the rest of the day at the Anywhere School.
Hi, I'm Kiri Gooch, National Accounts Manager in the UK Google for Education team. Across the world, we've seen many regional and government level responses to school closures due to COVID-19, and in this talk you'll be hearing about Welsh Government. The Welsh Government have been able to quickly adapt to the changing needs of teachers, learners and families, in addition to supporting digitally excluded learners. And the way that they did that was by using Cloud Ready by Neverware, which allowed them to upgrade 10,000 old devices, which were given out to students who had limited access to technology at home, meaning that these learners were still able to continue learning. The thing that stands out about Welsh Government is that they were already well on their way in their digital journey. This isn't just about a response to a pandemic. The Hub team, who you will hear more about later, are responsible for providing the National Education Digital Strategy, which includes centralised access to G Suite for Education and also funding for Chromebooks. Now I'm going to hand it over to Kat Kuchar, who's a head teacher in Wales, is going to explain a little bit more about Hub and give a brief overview of their response to the pandemic. And then you'll also hear from our second speaker, Oshan, who will give us more of an overview of the Neverware deployment.
Hi, I'm Kat Kuchar, head teacher at Jubilee Park Primary School in Newport, Wales in the UK. I'm going to talk to you about using Hub as a learning platform. Hub is the digital platform for learning and teaching in Wales. Hub is a Welsh word meaning boost. It's very much like the English word meaning the centre of activity. Hub is central to education in Wales, and it provides Hub logins to all teachers and learners in maintained schools in Wales, allowing this provision to arrange centrally funded tools to help education practitioners create and share their own resources and assignments. A professional networking environment, Google for Education, Microsoft Office 365 and Minecraft Education, and most recently, Adobe Spark. Hub, being our digital platform, has had a heavy investment from Welsh Government, with over 45 million invested in school broadband connectivity to ensure equity in being able to access broadband across Wales. 18 million has been invested in infrastructure between 2019 and 2021. This has allowed all maintained schools in Wales to be provisioned with a single sign-on, so there are now over 550,000 users of Hub. Most recently, in March of this year, there were over 10.6 million monthly page views and 2.8 million logins. There's been a sustained increase in the use of Hub year on year. And comparing March 2019 to March 2020, there's been a 131% increase in the usage of Hub. Training has been delivered to all schools across Wales, and there's been extensive work around GDPR and consent for learners. Being able to access a single sign-on for nationally deployed services really has started to impact on teaching and learning in Wales. During the current global pandemic of coronavirus, Welsh Government has been able to provide learners with access to Hub. This has been an ambitious programme to support digitally excluded learners in having the equipment they need for distance learning. Working in conjunction with local authorities and schools, existing school devices have been transformed into fully functioning Chromebooks using the Neverware's Cloud Ready technology. This has allowed children that haven't got access to devices to have access to devices at home. This has allowed them to be able to engage in the online teaching and learning provided from their schools.
My name's Oz and I'm here from Ysgol Broedan, a secondary school in Cardiff, Wales. Welsh Government have invested a lot of money into Cloud Ready by Neverware. This is an initiative that has targeted these disadvantaged learners over the past 4 months to ensure that they also have access to digital learning. What they've managed to do with Cloud Ready by Neverware is bring life to old devices that were previously defunct. In schools, any device that was lying around the place, no longer able to connect to the school network, could be refurbed and used with Cloud Ready. This was now a Chromebook that could be given to a child that they could use their single sign-on for Hub to access. Seamlessly integrating with everything they've already done in school with no need for extra training, they were now back in the world of digital learning. The government invested in 4G Wi-Fi dongles to make sure that these students also had access to the internet, and so there were no further barriers to their education, meaning that some of these families that had maybe 0 devices or maybe one to share between several siblings were now able to have more fair, equal access to the learning that other students were enjoying. Going forward, we are looking forward to using this in order to refurb our entire school ICT suites, bringing more devices into school, giving more students access to digital learning and improving blended learning for the future in the event of any further lockdowns, but also for the future of their digital education.
We know this time has been particularly challenging for head teachers. We're particularly impressed with how Hub has considered all elements of digital learning. I'm now going to hand back to Kat, who's going to talk through how Hub has supported her as a head teacher during this time, starting with the key building blocks that have helped to drive a successful digital strategy across Wales.
So as I said at the beginning, I'm the head teacher at Jubilee Park Primary School. And to give you a little bit of context, we opened in September 2017 as a brand new school on a growing housing development. We opened with just over 100 children, and now we're at our capacity of 374 children. So in just 3 years, we've had a huge increase in pupils through our school. For me, everything that we do in our school is based upon our mission statement to inspire, nurture, and celebrate success. One of our vision principles is to ignite a passion for learning, and I really feel that effective use of digital technology is driven by learning and teaching and igniting that passion rather than specific technology. In fact, technology itself is not the end. Teachers really need support and time to engage in using digital technology appropriately so it does impact on teaching and learning. And for me, I like to use the catchphrase, it's process over product. It's not about Hub being a learning platform, but it's the process in which we engage with using Hub that really has the biggest impact. And to me, vision, curriculum and professional learning are all inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other. To be able to effectively engage in developing a learning platform, it starts with leaders. Digital learning and the use of Hub is a key priority for me in my school. And first and foremost, safeguarding my staff and the children within my care comes first. Hub offers a Keeping Safe Online area, which gives us lots of tools that we're able to use. We were also able to talk to our children and use Hub and talk about keeping safe online as we're using it. To me, it's about leading by example, making sure that all the leaders within my school are people that are championing the use of Hub and are using it effectively. We have an extensive monitoring, evaluation and review policy and procedures in place within our school, which allows us to really look at which aspects of Hub are having the biggest impact in teaching and learning and when, and crucially, why. The monitoring, evaluation and review takes on board feedback from a range of different sources, whether that's in lesson time, whether that's looking at children's work online, talking to children, talking to their parents and talking to staff themselves. The governors within our school also play a key role within the leadership. Governors are what you could call our critical friends. They have three main functions within schools in Wales. They give schools clear vision and strategic direction. They'll hold me to account, and they also see the financial situation within schools. The governors within my school are fully understanding of how we use Hub and fully promote the use of Hub within our school. I also have a team of digital leaders. The digital leaders are fantastic. They are the ones that will go around each class and they're children and they go around and they support each other. They will be the first to get on board with any new initiative that comes online with Hub, any new software. And they're the ones that really try to evoke a sense of pride and passion for using digital technology across our school. Some of our digital leaders also sit on our pupil leadership group called our Team 9. And they meet regularly with my school leadership team to talk about the benefits of using digital technology. Talking to learners is really crucial. You actually find out exactly what is happening and how digital technology is impacting upon them as children. So using Hub as a learning platform really has impacted upon school organisation as a whole. First and foremost, my staff having one single sign-on to data and to information that's accessible and safe is fantastic. They're able to access this information and have clarity about what's expected of them within their day-to-day practices. They can access this at home or in school because it's available via cloud technology. This has really improved the organisation as a whole and also improved the trust and agency amongst my staff. We communicate digitally with parents, Again, we haven't got paper that's going out that can get lost. We haven't got paper that staff could lose. Really using this technology has improved our school organisation as a whole. Staff communicate using Outlook as an email provider, but also then looking at Google Calendar. So all of our staff have their own personal Google calendars, but they can also access a school calendar as well. They have Google Drive and they have shared drives. And the shared drives have been invaluable for us to share timetables and policies, to share staff's planning. Long gone are the days where staff keep their planning in a folder in their classroom and don't share it with each other. Having a shared drive with everybody's planning on the devices enables everybody to learn from each other. And collaboration using Google has been really, really important for us. The ability to put comments on shared documents, to capture live feedback during professional and development sessions, and having shared documents that we can all work on remotely has proven really, really important for us, particularly in the recent period of school lockdown. We didn't have to pause our school development or our school improvement, or even in fact professional learning and development. We were able to run weekly professional learning development sessions and engage collaboratively using Google tools. In terms of learning and teaching, the use of Hub really impacts upon the work that my staff do. It's built into our MIS system and it also has digital consent, so every parent has to consent to their children using Hub as a learning platform. For children, there is also a single sign-on. They have to remember one username and one password to be able to access all of the information that they need within school. And crucially, they're able to log into Chromebooks using the same account. All of the children in my school have a Google Drive and a shared drive. They're also able to use the same facilities that we do as staff and collaborate on each other's work, have shared documents and comment and work together. Each class has a Google Classroom, which again has proved invaluable during the recent lockdown period for both parents and children to keep connected with their teachers. Teachers will often use the assignments facility within Google too. In that way, they're able to provide dedicated feedback and personalised feedback to children to be able to improve their work. Hub also allows us to have access to other software, for instance, Britannica Encyclopedia, Adobe Spark and J2E. All of this is underpinned by sound online safety, both using Hub and the online safety work there, and also through the conversations and the teaching and learning that happens on a daily basis in school. You can see on the screen some comments made by the staff within school. Things like that the Hub platform allows children to be able to use a platform that is safe, connecting with the community. Children can access a plethora of resources, and that collaborative documents and assignments really did encourage engagement during our recent lockdown period. Welsh Government have co-constructed the Digital Competence Framework, the DCF. This was done alongside practitioners from what were called digital pioneer schools, and they drew on research, including consideration of existing regional and international digital frameworks. The DCF encapsulates a range of skills that will help learners thrive in an increasingly digital world. And the DCF sets out the digital skills to be attained by learners between the ages of 3 to 16 across 4 strands. Those being citizenship, interacting and collaborating, producing, and data and computational thinking. Each strand is split into a further number of elements, and for us, using Hub as a learning platform supports us in developing our vision for digital competence across the curriculum. So to end, I like to think about using Hub as a learning platform as very similar to Simon Sinek's Golden Circles model. When considering technology, many people will look straight at the what. What does the learning platform provide us in a school? But to me, it's not about the technology itself. It is about our why. And through the development of Hub as a learning platform, we have continued to focus on our why. At Jubilee Park, our why is that we want our children to thrive in a transforming world. And we see digital technology, and specifically the use of Hub as a learning platform, central to this. And to enable this learning platform to be delivered effectively in schools relies on strategy. Head teachers having an understanding of how technology can be used effectively. It's about the process then of developing that strategy into action, reflecting upon the impact of that strategy, both on teachers teaching and on how learners are learning. And first and foremost, leadership, making sure that leaders really do believe in the importance of using digital technology, and for us in Wales, using Hub as a learning platform.
Thanks, Kat. As we all know, assessing the why is integral to the success of any strategy. I'm now going to hand back over to Oshan, a teacher in Cardiff, who will detail how Hub caters to the needs of their key stakeholders: students, staff, parents, and governors.
We have over 800 students of differing backgrounds and a wide range of catchment areas. 31% of our school's pupils live in 20% of the most deprived areas in Wales, and that comes from a report by Estyn, the organisation responsible for inspecting schools in Wales. We're a Welsh medium school, which means that all of our students learn every subject through the medium of Welsh. It's quite a big deal because the majority of our students don't speak Welsh at home, and so effectively are learning through their second language. We decided on the inception of the school in 2012 that we would be a one-to-one deployment school, meaning that every one of our students has a device. And so from 2013 onwards, we have provided every student in school with a personal device, which gives them a lot more access to obviously digital learning. Hub has become a very, very important part of our school. Obviously, digital is a very natural embedded part of our school life, and we like to look at things from a four-pronged perspective. The four types of stakeholders that we have are students, teachers, parents, and governors, and Hub plays an important role in all of those stakeholders and their roles within the school. For students, we have EWAL, the Wall, which is a centralised Google site for all student resources. It has everything that they need on a daily basis, and it's replaced the school planners, so they no longer carry a handbook with them throughout school. They do most of their lessons through Google Classroom. Any digital learning is done through here, and obviously that gives teachers an ability to organise and distribute tasks regularly and give feedback. Hub provides a load of other resources, such as the Encyclopedia Britannica. It also has a system of playlists of links, videos, songs, and other sorts of resources put into organised and structured playlists. Hub has also invested a lot of money in third-party applications, the latest which is Adobe Spark, as Kat mentioned earlier on. And because this is web-based, of course, it's available on all devices. It doesn't matter what device you have, the children have access to it. And the main thing for students is that it is one username that they have to remember and one password to have access to all of these resources that the Welsh Government has invested in and that we use as a school. The Wall, or EWAL as we like to call it, has links to the resources that students need. It's replaced their planner, so it has information on their timetables. It also has access to their Google Classrooms, but there is also a large focus on student well-being and links and resources that can help them when they're finding things a bit difficult. For the teachers, we have a similar site, which is called Ardal Staff, or in English, the Staff Room. It's another centralised Google site, which plays a similar role for the staff that it does to the students. We have access to all the collaborative working meetings that we have. We have shared drives, which provide secure access to departmental data and obviously departmental resources as well. It has access to networks that are in school, and because Hub is a cross-country and inter-school protocol, we also have access to those groups working across schools in Wales. Hub have also made professional development playlists for teachers, which allows them to digitally improve their skills, even if they are not able to physically be at sessions where they are able to improve their teaching development. It gives access to resources from the local consortia who work very hard to provide these resources in order to improve the standard of teaching in Wales. One of the main things for Welsh language teachers is that we find it difficult to find resources. If we were teaching through the medium of English, there are a myriad of different places we could go to for our resources. But speaking Welsh, we find that we have to make most of the things ourselves. Hub has allowed us to interact as a large community across Wales, and it takes a lot of the strain off teachers being able to share Welsh language resources across the country through the digital platform. We also have access to national strategic resources like Kat mentioned about the DCF, the Digital Competency Framework. We also have a new curriculum being released in Wales. We have other skills framework for literacy and numeracy, and also personalised assessments, which are done with Key Stage 3 at the moment. What this means is that the government as a whole has created a large single point resource for the entirety of education in Wales, and it makes teachers' lives a lot easier. The staff room has access to all of the resources that teachers would need. It's added to almost on a daily basis. It has a digital handbook, which is handy for staff who are currently working in the school, and obviously for new staff who join us. Just as we look after the student wellbeing, the adult staff has access to staff wellbeing links as well. And of course, it has access to continual professional development, professional learning communities, that's groups of teachers working on certain aspects of education. And also it has access to all our school calendars and much more. Using Hub and Google through Hub specifically to interact with students has been an integral part of our journey over the past few years. The past 4 months, specifically with being under lockdown, has really put these tools to the test. Teachers have been recording asynchronous videos, introducing tasks. We've created resources in order for our students to gain access to their education. But we can also use the myriad of features available to give feedback. Using a stylus on any sort of tablet to give annotation on work. We can use suggesting mode, which promotes the children to improve their own work. Obviously, there are comment banks, but rubrics have been a very, very important addition to Google Classroom over the last few months. Rubrics provide key information for students before they even begin a task, and also give them detailed feedback once they've completed. I think the real winner over the past few months has been Screencastify, which is a third-party add-on for Google Chrome. And this has been enabled teachers to give students specific, personalised video feedback on tasks that they've completed, which has made teachers' lives easier, but it has also made the link between teachers and students a lot stronger over such a difficult time. Parents play a very important role in our school family. And they also have access to WAL, the wall, for the central site for all the student resources. But it also has links to parent resources too, such as how to pay for school food in the canteen, links to where to get uniform from, for example, information about trips and all the school letters that we send out. They have access to the reports on the progress in Google Classroom, as you would expect, but also there are resources and news on Hub itself on the site on how to keep their children safe online, things that they can do in order to make the process of learning at home easier, and also building on the relationship between the school and the home. We've used Google Forms to collect and report on parent voice over the last few months very regularly, and it has been integral to the changes that we've made in our strategy to digital learning at home. The relationship between staff and parents has been made all the more stronger for this interaction where parents are able to give us feedback, and Google Forms has made that possible. With this large investment by the Welsh Government into Hub, it also means that families have access to a lot of cross-platform software free of charge, which is very, very important, especially thinking back to where a large proportion of our students come from and the disadvantages that perhaps they face. Governors are a very key cog in our school machine. And we also have a Google site specifically built for them with their own special area on our digital platform. Hub provides them, again, with a single sign-on access, and it means that they have access securely to the information and data and also groups that they would need to be involved in order to do their jobs governing the school. They can collaborate in digital meetings. They have access to shared drives, which again are very secure in containing the data and information that they need to do their jobs. But they can also have access to the Google Classrooms. They have access to the work that the students are doing, and they can see the fruits of all the work that they are providing on the top end of the school and the results from the hands of the students in virtual learning walks. They have secure access to cloud-stored data for the governance of the school, as I've mentioned, but they also have access to the national strategic resources on the curriculum skills frameworks, meaning that they always have their fingers on the pulse when they are coming in to work with the staff who are, as we say, working on the coalface. Hub also has a lot of wider benefits. Technical details such as the ability to map the school's own domain for branding of email addresses and also for domains and subdomains. It integrates seamlessly with the school's management information system with a secure two-part authenticated cloud-based management. What that means is we no longer have to rely on a technician on site. If we need access to accounts, if we need to change any details, we can do that from wherever we are. We can manage devices without the need for expensive third-party applications, saving the school money, but also making things much more efficient in a classroom situation. And it is completely seamless and cross-platform, which means that no matter what device the child or the parent is using, they have access to the information that they need. There are no longer barriers to their teaching and learning. I'm now going to pass back to Kat, who's going to take us through and wrap up with regards to strategy leadership and the impact on teaching and learning.
Thanks, Oz. So I'm hoping that what you've been able to see by listening to both myself and Oz speak is that Hub is really central to education within our schools. If you go back to the beginning, I explained that Hub is the Welsh word meaning boost. And Hub as a learning platform has really given education in our schools a boost. First and foremost, it starts with our strategies. You have to have an effective strategy for rolling out a learning platform such as Hub. It also relies on quality leadership and strong leadership that firmly believe in digital technology and the benefits that engaging with digital technology can bring to your school. As Oz described, the recent lockdown has really enabled us to use Hub to ensure that continuity of learning for both children from nursery age, that's age 3 to 4, right up to children of age 16 to 18. That continuity of learning during a period of real unsettled times for education has been crucial. And to end, Hub has really benefited and impacted upon learning and teaching within our schools. It's enabled a wealth of resources for our teachers to have in the cloud, ready, they can use it whenever they need to. And crucially, it's enabled our children to learn more effectively. So Hub as a learning platform has really benefited both of our schools in Wales. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to Hybrid Learning. My name is Emma Pass. You can find me on Twitter at Emma B. Pass. I am a Google certified trainer and innovator, an EdTech consultant with Canopy, and a secondary English teacher. I have taught in Las Vegas, Nevada, London, England, and I currently live in Fort Collins, Colorado, where I teach 7th and 8th grade English at PSD Global Academy. We are a K through 12 hybrid school, which means that our students spend about half of their week on site, coming to school and engaging in really traditional education. But they also spend the other half of the week at home learning remotely. This model was developed over 10 years. We started as a completely online school, but started to add those in-person days as we got feedback from students and parents who wanted this really flexible student-driven learning experience, as well as the culture and community that comes with going to school. So everything I talk about today is born out of my experience as a hybrid teacher. And as any good teacher would, we're going to start with some key terms that you'll need to know for the session, starting with the difference between hybrid and blended learning. Now, I hear a lot of people use these terms synonymously, but the difference is hybrid learning really refers to the place that learning is happening. So a combination of in-person school and remote home learning. Whereas blended learning refers to the tool, usually a combination of traditional tools like paper and books and online learning tools like Chromebooks and websites. We're going to start by looking at a few hybrid school models to give you an idea of how you might balance this in-person and remote learning. And I want to start by showing you my school model. This is PGA Middle School pre-COVID. So we have all of our students on site on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and all of our students are remote on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I really wanted to start with this to emphasize that what we're going to see in the fall is likely not a traditional hybrid school model, but instead an emergency response to coronavirus, particularly in the need to limit number of students who are in the classroom together. So most commonly what we're seeing is splitting students into these two groups, groups A and group B, that alternate when they're in the school building. What we see here is COVID response model number 1, where groups A and B are alternating within the week. We have a Monday-Thursday group and a Tuesday-Friday group. And I want to emphasize that I've reserved that Wednesday for high-needs students to come to campus and receive those additional supports and interventions, as well as some additional teacher plan time, which I think will be greatly needed by teachers this year. COVID response model number 2 has groups A and B alternating entire weeks that they are on site and then entire weeks where they are remote. And COVID response model number 3 has groups A and B on school every single day, but alternating whether they're there in the morning or afternoon with a deep cleaning of the school building during lunchtime. Regardless of the hybrid model your school adopts for the fall, the next thing you'll have to ask yourself is how are we going to deliver instruction to the students? And that brings us to the next 2 key terms, which is synchronous and asynchronous learning. Synchronous learning is when teaching and learning occurs together simultaneously. And this is what happens every time we're in the classroom with the students, but it's also what happens when we're teaching live online via a tool like Google Meet. Whereas asynchronous learning is typically a pre-built lesson that teachers are posting for students, and they're determining at what point in the day or at what point in the week they're going to access that information. Now, most schools are going to adopt a model on the left where all students who are on site in the classroom are engaging in synchronous learning with their teacher, whereas all the students who are at home are engaging in an asynchronous lesson that has been pre-built and posted for them. However, there are schools who are trying to coordinate their lessons, which means the teacher who is in the classroom with the students will be teaching, but also live streaming that synchronous lesson over Google Meet for the students who are at home so they can engage in the lesson real time with their peers. Now I'm going to jump into some tips for teaching, whether that is synchronously or asynchronously, starting with synchronous learning over Google Meet. The first thing is to make sure you're always recording your meets for students so they can be available later. I love seeing my students live online. However, we don't really know the difficulties that students face at home that might prevent them from logging in and attending your class at a certain time. So having that recording that we can provide to them later makes sure that all the students are able to access their information equitably. Number 2, make sure you use the Google Meet chat box to engage your students throughout the lesson. Don't just let them attend your online class passively. I have my students typing a number of answers, questions, code words, and even clapping hand emojis for each other when they share out during class. It really keeps them active and engaged throughout. However, if you are teaching online, chances are you're sharing your entire screen to share a presentation, to play a video, or to demonstrate how to do something. And it's really hard to also monitor that Google Meet and make sure that you're answering questions in the chat box or making sure students are staying on topic, which is why I always join my Google Meet twice. I join once on my computer for the presentation and also where the camera and the microphone are, and I join once on my phone. I turn the sound all the way down, I mute, I turn the camera off, and I just use it to monitor that chat box. Again, to answer questions that come up and to make sure the students have not strayed way off the topic of the lesson. Even if you're not using Google Meet to deliver live synchronous lessons online, you might still consider using it to just have daily check-ins with your students, similar to what they would do in an elementary or a primary school called a Monday or morning meeting. You might consider taking 10 minutes at the start of your class to log on to a Google Meet where the students in your classroom can see the faces of your students who are at home. You can check in, share, say hello, and just continue to build that classroom and community culture. Similarly, just because your students aren't all in the same room, it doesn't mean they still can't collaborate on the same work. Google has a number of collaboration tools, including Google Classroom Questions, Google Docs, and Google Slides that will allow your students who are in the room to comment on and contribute to the work your students at home are doing, and vice versa. Google Slides is one of my absolute favorite all-around learning tools because I use it both for synchronous and for asynchronous instruction. For synchronous learning, I'm usually presenting a lesson very similar to this, and I like to use several tools in our toolbar down here in the left-hand side. The first one, smack dab in the middle, you see I'm using the pointer tool, which will allow me to indicate certain elements on the slides. To the right, I have captions, and when that's turned on, you'll see my lesson is now being captioned, which is great for our students who are deaf, hard of hearing, our English language learners, and even our easily distracted learners. Over here to the left, we have the Q&A tool, which will give your students a unique link up here at the top that they can access on their individual devices and ask you questions as you go through your presentation in real time. As the teacher, you can see those questions appear and answer them via this separate window. For asynchronous learning, I use Google Slides to build an entire lesson that I want my students to be able to self-direct through when they're at home. And that usually looks something like this. My asynchronous slides always start with a title slide, a learning target, an overview of the lesson, as well as a video that provides direct instruction. Now, one great thing about Google Slides is it's really easy to insert a video directly from your Google Drive, or you're able to search from YouTube. Once you have a video for your students to watch on your slides, you want to make sure they're actually watching it, which is why I've started to add comprehension questions and ask my students to answer them directly within the slide deck. Now, oftentimes when I'm finding videos from YouTube, they're quite a bit longer than what I actually need my students to watch. So another nice feature is the format options tool, which over here on the right-hand side, you can see, you can determine exactly when you want the video to start and exactly when you want the video to end for your students. So maybe we're asking a comprehension question at exactly the 1 minute mark. And if you'd like to ask additional questions, all you have to do is go over to your slide, right-click, duplicate, and then on this new slide, determine a new start and end time. So we'll start this one at 1 minute, and we'll end at 1 minute 30 seconds, and then adjust or adapt your comprehension question. Although YouTube is an amazing resource for finding content for your students, oftentimes I'm recording videos myself. I think it's really nice to give that personal instruction and for students to be able to see your face and hear your voice. I'll either use Google Meet by joining a Meet, sharing my screen and recording by myself, or I'll use a Chrome extension like Screencastify that will allow me to record my entire screen, my webcam, or a combination of both. In each case, Google Meet and Screencastify automatically save those videos directly to your drive, so it's just as easy to insert the videos into your slides. If you are doing asynchronous lessons and recording your own screen, you might consider using a tool called Jamboard. Jamboard is a digital whiteboard that allows you to handwrite and demonstrate on your screen, which is really great, especially for working through math equations. My last tip for asynchronous learning is to consider using a tool like Applied Digital Skills. Applied Digital Skills is a free online platform that has entirely pre-built video-based lessons. They teach digital skills like building a website, as well as practical life skills like how to create a budget. And they have room for you to kind of embed your own content-specific information into them. This is an example of what an applied digital skills lesson looks like. As you can see, it's very simple to navigate through, easy and intuitive. The best thing about applied digital skills is anyone can use them. I use them with my students, but I also share them out with staff and colleagues who might need help learning how to organize their Google Drive or how to make a quiz in Google Forms. The next thing I'll talk about is how to organize your digital space and how to best communicate with your students and parents. Starting with Google Classroom. I call Google Classroom my mission control center. It's where my students go to start absolutely everything they do. And the first thing we'll look at is the classwork tab. Consider how you're organizing your topics or your headers in the classwork tab to make sure your students can access their work as easily as possible. In the case of my school, we always label our topics or our headers by week, so the students know which week we're on. And then each individual lesson is titled by day, so they know what they're expected to work on that day. Another great tool in Google Classroom for assignments are rubrics. Rubrics help you set really clear expectations for what students should be doing on each task, and it also helps students self-reflect on their learning. However, Google Classroom is not all about work. In the absence of hallways and lunchrooms, we need to make sure we're providing digital spaces for our students to connect socially and emotionally, which is why I use my Google Classroom stream for students to have absolutely free discussions. As long as it's school appropriate, students can post memes and videos and chat about whatever they'd like. My philosophy is if we can get students excited to come onto our learning management system to say hello, they're one step closer to being able to do that classwork. However, if you are teaching littler learners and you don't need the complexity of a learning management system like Google Classroom, you might consider using a tool like Google Sites to post daily videos and resources for parents to be able to assist their students in the remote learning for that day. We also use Google Sites as a school website where students and parents can really easily access all of the announcements, links, and contact information. Some other options to consider for parent communication besides Google Sites include Google Classroom Guardian Summaries, which invite parents to either receive a daily or a weekly update on all of the work and announcements in their students' Google Classroom for all subject areas. You might also consider hosting Google Meets for parents. That could be a Meet the Teacher night, parent-teacher conferences, and or recording videos on Screencastify, which might include help guides or frequently asked question videos, particularly for your tech tools that you're using, so parents can help their students if they get stuck at home. As we wrap up today, I do want to address some potential challenges that you might face in a hybrid environment. First and foremost, technology training. It is absolutely of utmost importance that both staff, students, and parents have the knowledge to access and use the tools they'll be expected to learn with. If we cannot use our tools, we cannot access our learning. Which brings us to number 2, teacher workload. Teachers are going to be learning entirely new systems of teaching on top of their responsibilities. So giving teachers as much plan time, space, and grace to complete these tasks. And we also need to be adaptable. There's a good chance that we might be starting in a hybrid model, going back to remote learning, and back into hybrid. On the student ends of things, some challenges include accountability. It's much harder to hold students accountable for doing their work when they're not physically with us every single day. It's also a little bit harder to engage students when they're at home, and they might potentially have some other options of things they could do besides going to online school. So we ask ourselves as teachers, how can we make our lessons as interesting and fun and engaging as possible? So that's a choice students want to make. And providing that social connection time is often a big incentive to get students there. And then finally, how do we encourage students to maintain healthy school habits and routines even from home? Things like waking up at a standard time, creating a dedicated workspace, getting dressed for the day. However, I don't want to leave on a negative note. We're going to end in a positive and look at some potential benefits of hybrid learning. Smaller class sizes, particularly if we're splitting into A and B groups, chances are you're meeting with a smaller group of students you can dedicate more time to in face-to-face learning. I also think asynchronous learning is a huge silver lining to hybrid models in general. How often is it that all of our students need the exact same amount of time to complete a task? Never. So taking off some of that pressure to get done in a certain amount of time allows students to work at their own pace, and also it helps develop that independence and time management when they're really directing their learning for the day. Hopefully parents are a part of that, and teachers and parents are able to foster a closer relationship as they're both a part of the student's learning experience. Everything that I've said in our lesson today, as well as so much more, I've included in my book. It's called The Hybrid Teacher, and it is set for publication in 2021. However, I realized that this is information that teachers need now, which is why I've released an abridged version as a free PDF download to help teachers prepare for what is sure to be a really uncertain year. So if you think this information might be helpful for you, you can access that by typing into your URL bit.ly/hybrid teacher. Thank you so much for coming to the session today. I wish you all the best in the upcoming school year. Bye.
Hi, and welcome to this Google for Education series about leadership in complex times. My name is James Longwell, and I'm an organization development practitioner. You might well ask what that means in practice. Well, I'm part of Google's global HR function, and I work in a team that specializes in large-scale organizational change, helping Google be more effective, thinking about how we design the organization for the future, building future capabilities. It's a really, really exciting job, and I and my colleagues are working to help build the Google of the future. One of the things that we do, I'm part of the Google School for Leaders, which is our internal business school. And in that Google School for Leaders, we share ideas and practices with our leaders that will also help them lead Google into the future. And some of these ideas are really, really powerful, applicable in any field of occupation, any type of work. And so I'm delighted to be able to bring some of these ideas to you today in today's talk. One of the things I want to emphasize is that you'll hear by my accent that I am British. And so although I have specialism and expertise in adult development, I'm less experienced in child development. So when I talk about schools and education and teachers and educational decision makers, my views are informed by having kids in the British education system. But I do know that this talk is going to be shared globally. And so I will try to make my examples as generic and as helpful as possible as we go through today's presentation. So this quote, "Leadership is an experimental art, and we are all at the frontier." This was actually written in 2009 by these three writers. And one of the things that they talked about when they wrote this was that the world was experiencing unprecedented levels of complexity. Well, I bet they didn't see what was coming in 2020, just over a decade later. Their words could not have been truer. And what they were advocating is, in this day and age, the traditional models of leadership, the traditional models of management, they don't work anymore in the same way that they might have done. They were advocating for a new type of leadership, one which was much more experimental and, interestingly, much more of an art rather than a science, which is where a lot of leadership and management ideas originated. And so over the course of the rest of this presentation, I'm going to introduce you to some ideas that we share with our leaders that they have found very helpful in thinking about their own leadership practice and adopting this more experimental type of leadership that we're finding so helpful in Google. First of all, I'd like to talk about leadership practices for complex times, and there are 4 of them. The first is asking different questions. The next is taking multiple perspectives. The third is seeing systems. And the 4th is experimenting and learning. So let me take you through each of these leadership practices in turn. So the first practice, asking different questions. Think back to when you were a child and think about the type of questions that you asked. Or indeed, if any of you are in early year education, think about the questions that 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds ask. Some of those questions are truly marvelous. They're truly awe-inspiring. And you as an educator, and me as a parent, sometimes go, wow, where did those questions come from? They make you stop and think. They make you think, how on earth am I going to answer that question? Or can I even answer that question? And as we get older, more emphasis gets placed in education about knowing things and knowing absolutes and building up a picture of the world according to the perceived wisdom. And some of that childlike curiosity gets lost. So the thing here about asking different questions is it's really encouraging leaders to go back to this notion of thinking, what might like that childlike question be? If a child walked into a meeting and heard us talking about what are we going to be working on this term, what might they ask us? So we do the same kind of work with our leaders to say, who are those people that ask you questions that really prompt you to think differently, to consider things differently? And that's at essence a really, really important practice for leadership. Let's get out of our current patterns of thinking, our current way of looking at the world, and get people around us who can ask questions which are going to challenge us and really help us to think differently. The second practice, taking multiple perspectives. For me, this practice is rooted in understanding who you are, where you were raised, and what influences the way that you think about the world. What profession did you get trained in? How did you get trained? What was the nature of it? As we ourselves go through the education system and think about this, our perspectives get formed, and they get formed quite strongly. And indeed, there needs to be some consistency for us to do our job effectively. But the really challenging and liberating thing that happens with our Google leaders when we take them through these ideas is that we ask them to let go of certainty, to let go of always knowing, of always having a perspective. And if you do that, then you can take on more strongly the perspectives of others, which may really have a different point of view, a different perspective. And to give you a real live practical example that's both live within Google and live around the world would be the recent protests that followed the death of George Floyd around the Black Lives Matter movement. In the country in which I live, the UK, this led to statues being toppled and, perhaps more importantly, questions being asked about where was the role of significant Black Britons in the history of Britain in the way that we educate people. A question that may have been asked before, but wasn't really heard, but now suddenly was being amplified and being asked all over the country, and conversations now appearing on mainstream TV channels and all over the social media. So every so often we need to say, how does my perspective need to shift in order to accommodate a new reality? And this is a vital, vital skill for leaders around how do I keep my perspective fresh? So this is the second practice. The third practice is about seeing systems. And when we work with Google leaders around these ideas around leading in complexity, one of the things that we ask them to do is to map their system with them at the center of it. Who are they connected to? And who are those people that they are connected to in turn? And when they've done the first iteration of their system map, we ask them, who else? And very often, a whole load more people get added to their systems map. And this is really, really important because we don't work in silos. We don't work in isolation. We work in a very interconnected world, and even more so because of technology. Often, an unintended, well-intentioned decision can have massive downstream consequences. And in the education field, a decision, a small change in testing policy, an accidental error in an exam paper, whilst at the micro level might not appear to have much impact, at the macro level can have a huge knock-on consideration. So we encourage our leaders to think, when you take a decision, who else might this decision impact? And get beyond the immediate circle that surrounds you. Think more broadly around the system that you are part of. Systemic leadership is a really, really important quality for Google leaders. And the fourth practice, experiment and learn. I will come to say more about this at the end of the presentation. For now, the reason a kangaroo is in the picture here is because the kangaroo is a really good illustration of an animal that has learned to adapt to its circumstances and its environment. In Australia, a country that can experience extremes of heat and floods and so on, the kangaroo is able to thrive regardless of all of these. And what we're saying here is the kangaroo is a metaphor for the type of adaptability that we need leaders in Google to develop. So in summary, 4 leadership practices for complex times: asking different questions, taking multiple perspectives, seeing systems, and experimenting and learning. I'd now like to move on to an idea that we share with Google leaders. So back to this idea of systemic leadership. We share a model that's called Cynefin, and my apologies to any Welsh speakers where I've mispronounced that. Cynefin is a word that has a meaning of belonging to multiple places. It can refer to your culture, to your family, to your geography, your actual place in the land. And Dave Snowden, who created the Cynefin framework, chose Cynefin deliberately because Cynefin is a way of looking at complex systems and making sense of them and taking decisions about how to move forward. So I will now move on to show you the Cynefin framework. So Cynefin, you can see on this that it looks like a conventional 2x2 framework, but in reality, it isn't really. And the first thing to say is that you'll see the continuum from unpredictable to predictable. There are elements of our lives and the work that we do that are very predictable, and there are elements that are unpredictable. And that's a key aspect of the Cynefin model, because it says that depending on whether things are predictable or unpredictable informs how we as leaders should respond and develop. So the first domain is what we call obvious, and it's the realm of best practice. And to bring it to life in an educational context, think about the arrival procedures at a school. Before COVID, these may have been considered once a year. There would be a safeguarding review, or there would be a consideration, or maybe a conversation as a parent-teachers meeting. They wouldn't need to be reviewed so frequently. They should just run, and they shouldn't have to be thought about. Now, of course, with COVID, that has changed entirely, and arrival procedures have been thrown up in the air. But they're a good example of something that at one level is obvious, but then when a big shift happens, they can also need an adaptation, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. The next part of the Cynefin framework is complicated, and this is the area of good practice. And here, to give an example in the educational field, we might think about curriculum design. There are many ways to design a curriculum. There are many different educational philosophies about how to approach designing a curriculum for a year. There is not necessarily one right answer. There are multiple ways of approaching it, and likely to be multiple ways of being effective. So now we're into the realm of your judgment, your discretion, what you're able to do as an educator or an educational decision maker. This is where your kind of where your own development, your own education comes into play. And for Google leaders, this is very similar. They pride themselves on being able to solve complex technical or customer challenges. And that's what they get rewarded for and what they really, really enjoy. And it's a really important part of the role that they play. However, there is also that, but this is all in the predictable world, where we can talk about predictable cause and effect. We move across to the other side of the Cynefin framework in complex. Here, the challenge is that things are unpredictable, unrepeatable, and not necessarily likely to ever be scalable in exactly the same way. And here, one example could be behavior. So in the classroom, each year, you get a new group of students. They behave in their unique way. You cannot possibly predict the dynamics. Your experience as a teacher or an educator has given you some ideas and some tools and the resources how to respond to this. But every year, the act of managing dynamics amongst your group of learners, that's a complex challenge. And to give a COVID-related example, how do you make the decision about what gets moved online? So, do you offer online education? Do you use video calls? Have you got the right platform? Do we set the same type of work? So a lot of questions milling around there, and really there is no right answer. You can only really find out by experimentation. So back to this idea of experimentation again. And finally, we have the chaotic domain. Now, the thing about the chaotic domain is the way we used to teach Google leaders about this is that we talk about, think about like large events, such as a terrorist attack or an earthquake or some sort of traumatic event. This is how we used to talk about chaos. And in that moment of chaos, the thing you have to do is to stabilize as far as possible. Emergency responders, check on people's welfare, check people are safe, then start to make decisions about what you need to do for the longer term. With COVID, we've had an unprecedented period of chaos. It's not somewhere where you can stay comfortably. And the point around this is you have to work out what can you respond to immediately that's obvious. So one example of this would be communicate with parents about what they can expect. The government has made a decision that all pupils need to go home, then each school also needs to communicate local impacts. In the UK, to move on to complicated, we had a decision about how do you accommodate key workers' children. So school didn't close for key workers. How would we deal with that? Not a situation that really has ever been dealt with before in quite the way, particularly with provision of education continuing through what were the school holidays. It's a complicated situation, and also social distancing needing to be put in place, etc. So that's an example during COVID of a complicated situation. Finally, in complex, the question is what next? How do we make up for the educational deficit through this period where the usual routines of education weren't taken care of, and we weren't able to keep up to date with the pupils in quite the way we wouldn't be able to see them in classrooms or responding in the way they've done. This is a place where we can only sense what's going on and respond emergently and with experimentation. So that's the idea of the Cynefin framework. In each situation, there are things we can do that are obvious, things that are complicated, and things that are complex. And just to kind of emphasize the word disorder, which I haven't referred to in the middle, that's the place that you are when you don't know which domain you're in. And it's uncomfortable to stay there. So the idea is to work out which domain might it be and get yourself working in that domain. And our leaders in Google have found this framework very liberating when they apply the lens of Cynefin to their work. So finally, safe to fail experiment design. The idea here is a new type of leadership that is less about very detailed, concrete, certain plans, and about a much more flexible approach to how we design and approach things. What could we do in a 5-week experiment with 5 people for less than £500 that would make a difference? For example, we've taken on a number of these experiments in Google, and we encourage our leaders to really play with this. And it's this idea of letting go of perfect, you can't get best, playful, interesting, and fun experiments that really help people push the boundaries. So this is an idea around shifting how you think about leadership. It's less about certainty, more about experimentation, more about spontaneity. And so I hope you have some fun thinking about what safe to fail experiments you could try in your educational context. This is a relatively short talk, so if you'd like more detail or more information about any of these ideas, you can go to the book Simple Habits for Complex Times, which has been written by Jennifer Garvey-Berger and Keith Johnson. It's a fantastic resource for this. So thanks for listening, and I hope you find these ideas useful in your educational context.
Hi all, I am delighted to be here representing Google and having the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Vicky Shotwell, the CEO of Parent Zone, who will discuss the important role that the program Be Internet Awesome plays in supporting children to become good digital citizens. Let me first introduce myself. I recently joined Google as a child safety lead. I have a long-standing career in child safety, working first in the UK government and more recently at the NSPCC, the UK's leading charity for child protection. These are important times for children and family, and this public health crisis has been a challenge, but also an opportunity to test the role of technology in supporting children to learn, grow, and stay connected with friends and loved ones. I am excited to be representing Google at this global event. At Google, we have a strong commitment to make technology that works for all, but also importantly, making sure that it works for children and families. We believe deeply in technology's ability to unlock creativity and engagement, but we are also understand the duty that we have to ensure that our products are used responsibly and that users have the tools and knowledge they need to make safe choices. Children across the world are accessing the internet at a younger age than ever before, and the decisions that they make today online can have a lasting impact. That's why we believe it's important that teachers and parents are equipped with all the tools they need to help children navigate their digital lives safely and confidently. In addition to the products available to schools, such as Google for Education covered throughout this event, we have a number of additional products contributing to our commitment to children and families. And of course, we have Be Internet Awesome, which we have developed with experts all over the world and has now launched in 30 countries and 15 different languages. The program is free and consists, among others, of teaching resources, an online game, and resources for families to help empower children to be confident explorers of the online world. In the UK, we have partnered with Parent Zone, the experts in digital family life, to deliver the UK version, Be Internet Legends. We are proud to say that thanks to this partnership, we have successfully reached over 3 million children and 70% of primary schools across the UK. Finally, we are also conscious that there are other challenges for us. How to make sure that the message is getting across, and importantly, how to support those children and families that might have lower digital literacy and limited access to technology, and who perversely might benefit the most from this program. There is more to do, and we hope you'll join us in our mission to ensure that children across the world are learning, exploring, and staying safe online. Now over to Vicky. Thank you.
So thank you, Almudena. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Vicky and I am the founder and the CEO of Parent Zone. We're an organisation that helps families navigate all of the complexity of a connected world. And what that means in practice is that we work with parents directly. We also work with children and young people. And we work with the professionals and the teachers that support families and are such an important part of helping to raise confident young people. I'm going to talk about 3 broad areas of things. The first, digital education and families. I'm going to look at internet safety and particularly digital resilience, which is something that informs all of the work that we do. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about Be Internet Legends, the program that we deliver in partnership with Google. Digital tools have been such a vital resource for families throughout the COVID crisis. I think we've all been relying on them. They've enabled parents to work from home, to stay in touch, and of course to work with teachers to make sure that children's educations could be continued. I think it's kind of difficult to imagine how any of us would have managed without technology to help. As a parenting organisation, we saw families ask different questions about technology over the last few months. We started to get questions like, how can I choose a platform that will help my children to keep in touch with their friends? Or can you recommend some good education tools? A very different tone of conversation to the one that we would usually have, which would focus much more on Are there ways I can manage my children's devices, and what should I be doing to make sure that they're safe? And actually, we felt that this conversation was a really good one. It's been a very positive time for families to connect, for generations to have different conversations, and for everybody to be part of that shared experience of managing digital in their lives. But of course, with all that increased reliance on technology, there have been additional concerns, additional challenges for us to think about. Perhaps that first one, the question of children having access to the internet. We forget sometimes that large numbers of children aren't active internet users. Not all children have a reliable, steady internet connection available to them. And even where that connectivity is good, that obviously doesn't mean that children always have the devices that they need available to them all of the time on demand. Of course they don't. In the UK, we heard a lot from teachers who were finding that children were sharing devices, families were sharing devices, and what that sometimes meant was that children were using an inappropriate device to do something, like trying to do their homework on a smartphone, for example, or trying to join in an online lesson on a smartphone where it's very difficult to have engagement because it's a difficult device to use for that purpose. So even where children were well connected, it didn't necessarily mean that digital access was easy or straightforward. And then, of course, where children were using devices and were on screens an awful lot, then other concerns come up, and concerns around digital well-being and screen time, and parents really starting to worry that actually maybe their children were spending a little bit too much time sitting in front of a screen. And in fact, I think probably all of us worry sometimes that we're devoting a little bit too much time to being in front of a screen and not enough time to doing other things, sometimes portrayed as much healthier activities. We always say there's no such thing as good screen time or bad screen time or too much screen time. What's important is that you have a mix and that your children are able to make sure that they're having good friendships, doing their homework, but also using technology in appropriate ways. And I think over this period, it's been quite difficult to find that good balance of activity, and that's led to worries for lots and lots of parents. And then finally, perhaps the most serious risk of all, with all of that increased amount of time online, concerns about harm to children have, of course, increased. The National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children in America received 4.2 million reports in April. That's up 2 million from March. And if you compare it to the year before, it's 3 million reports more than they received in April 2019, which is a huge increase. And of course, very much related to the fact that so many more people were online, including people who do not have children's best interests at heart. And that's why internet safety is such an important topic right now. I think at the start of the COVID crisis, I was somebody who thought that perhaps the subject area that we specialise in would go on the back burner for a moment or two, that it would be less important in the context of all of the complicated things that people were trying to deal with around the world, parents, families, educators, policymakers. We thought that perhaps internet safety would not be one of the things at the front of people's minds. And in fact, we were very wrong. It is absolutely critically important right now at a time when everybody's dependent on digital. That's the very moment that we need to make sure that people have the skills and the knowledge that they need to be safe. And to be really clear about good internet safety education, it is about much more than safety. It's not enough to make a child safe. You've got to be thinking about enabling them to flourish, to benefit from all the opportunities. Without safety, we can't amplify all of those benefits. We need to make children resilient enough to really flourish in a connected world. And I think that's what parents around the world want to do. They want to make sure that their children can flourish. I think resilience might just be one of those phrases that we've heard perhaps a little bit too much. It's a word that gets knocked around a lot. And I just want to spend a minute or two talking about it in the context of what we really mean when we're talking about digital resilience. Parents Zone worked with the Oxford Internet Institute to conduct some research to have a look to see whether a child who was resilient was more likely to benefit from opportunities online and less likely to experience harm. And the answer to that question was an absolutely resounding yes. In fact, we found that developing digital resilience was more important than any efforts to try and restrict a child's use or limit their access to technology. And that's not to say that tools aren't important to manage a children's online experiences and, of course, all those parental controls that parents use. These are really important tools and play an important role in making sure that a child is safer online. But the thing that needs to underpin it all is digital resilience, because that's the thing in the end that will give a child the skills and the knowledge and the attributes that they need to flourish in a digital world. In the UK, we recognised it was such an important subject that the UK government set up a digital resilience working group that I co-chair with a child adolescent psychiatrist called Dr. Richard Graham. And one of our first tasks was to really clarify what we mean when we're talking about digital resilience. What does a digitally resilient child look like, and what are the characteristics and traits that they have? And working with academics and with clinicians, we came up with 4 key aspects to digital resilience. The first one of those is that a child knows when they're at risk online. And that means that they are aware of their environment, they understand the risks in that environment, in much the same way that you teach a child about road safety, that you teach them to recognise safe places to cross the road and you teach them to look out for traffic on the road. It's that same notion in a digitally resilient child. They need to understand the environment that they're in and the risks that might be part of that environment. The second part of a digitally resilient child is that they need to be able to learn from experiences of when something goes wrong. And that learning is really crucially important, because if a child is learning from an experience, they're internalizing the learning and they're adapting their own behavior rather than relying on an adult or a teacher or a parent to tell them externally what the rules need to be when they're behaving online. And that's a really fundamental part of developing your digital resilience. You're developing your own knowledge and your own understanding, and you're learning and internalizing that behavior. The third thing that's really important is that a child knows how to get help if something goes wrong. Of course, things are going to go wrong. Things go wrong for all of us in large ways and small ways, and it's really important that when things get tricky, you understand what you can do to get help. And that might be in a digital platform. It might be about using the reporting tools, for example, but it might also be about asking somebody for help, asking a friend, getting peer support, asking your parent for some help. Knowing what to do if something's gone wrong is a really important part of developing digital resilience. And then the fourth characteristic of digital resilience was recovery, helping a child to recover when something's gone wrong so that they can get back into a digital world, continue to flourish, fully recovered from any negative experience that they might have. And that's really, really important. And sometimes it's something that we're not great at delivering when we do internet safety education, because sometimes we tell children inadvertently, I think, that if they make a mistake, it's a mistake that's going to be there forever because you can't take something off the internet. And in actual fact, there are things that you can do to recover from even difficult mistakes, and making sure that children understand that is an important part of supporting and delivering their digital resilience. What digital resilience isn't is bouncing back or toughening up. It's a process that gives a child the resources they need to call upon when they need them. It's about skills and behaviours. And whilst there's an awful lot that a child can do themselves, there's also an awful lot that we can do to support resilience. Which brings me very neatly to the Be Internet Legends programme, or Be Internet Awesome, as it's known in other parts of the world. Google and Parent Zone teamed up in 2018 to develop this programme because we wanted to create a programme that would empower children with the skills and knowledge they needed during their primary education. And as Almudena has already said, it's available now in over 30 countries, and it is a completely free programme. It's built on digital resilience programs. It teaches children those skills and behaviours that they need to help them become safer, more confident explorers of the digital world. And it leans on insights from children. And if you're a parent or If you're a teacher, this is not going to come as any surprise at all. But insights like the fact that children prefer to be told what they can do and not what they can't do. They also like to have something that they can aspire to be given something that they want to do, as opposed to be told things that they're not allowed to do. And that's what Be Internet Legends does. It gets them to aspire to being a legend and tells them that if they follow a simple code, they can master the internet, they can be in control, and they can have a great time. And you can see that code here, 5 deceptively simple, but hopefully memorable messages, definitely memorable when you've got 128-year-olds shouting it out loud. And those 5 pillars cover both skills and behaviours. So just starting with the first one, sharp and thinking before you share. And that's where, as you might guess, we're encouraging children to really think before they put something online, to figure out what's okay to share and what ought to be kept private. Alert is a pillar where we're teaching children to spot things online that aren't real, and that might include phishing attacks. What we say to children is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Insecure is where we're talking to children about the tools that are designed to help them keep their stuff safe. So that might be things like passwords or setting your phone to auto lock. I think very often we fall into the trap of thinking that children are great at using technology and therefore they don't need to be taught about things like tools, how to set passwords, the real basics, because we think that they're pretty good at figuring it out for themselves. And in actual fact, that's not the case. Just because they're fantastically quick to pick up their new game doesn't mean that they necessarily understand all of the tools that they need to be using to protect their stuff. And then the final 2 pillars, and I think these are my favourite 2 pillars, are kind and brave. And kind is where we're encouraging children to use the internet to do nice things, to share kindness, to create the sort of digital environment that they want to be part of with their friends, one that is nice and kind and positive. And in brave, that's where we're telling children that it's really brave to get help if they need it. And if they're in any doubt about anything that they come across, they should be discussing it with somebody. And the reason we call it brave is because for children, it is really brave to ask for help if they've done something wrong. I think quite often children are fearful that if they've done something wrong, they're going to get into trouble, because quite often that means that they've broken a rule that their parents set, or maybe they've done something that a teacher's told them they shouldn't do. So it's hard for them to say, I've made a mistake and this has happened, could you help me with it? So what we try to say to children is discuss. If you're not sure, if you're in doubt, if you've got a problem of any sort, discuss it with an adult and they will be there to help you. So we've been teaching this in schools now for 3 years, and the combination of a curriculum for teachers that they use to really embed the lessons in their classrooms, sometimes over a week or a term or even over a whole school year, that curriculum alongside assemblies that are designed to really inspire and engage pupils, and of course materials for parents so that we can continue the learning at home and embed some of those messages across the family, that's a really powerful combination, and no one element is more important than the others, I wouldn't say. Although perhaps the element that children particularly love is the online game, inevitably. COVID was quite a challenge for a programme that has so much face-to-face delivery, but we knew that for all of the reasons I've just outlined about internet safety and the challenges that we've all been facing, we knew that it was really vital that Be Internet Legends continued. So working with our partners at Google, we tried to figure out how we could deliver this whole programme virtually. We wanted to really maintain the levels of engagement and try to recreate that live experience. And I have to say, the impact of that has been pretty extraordinary. I can't say that I went into the whole process of reimagining this program for digital delivery, all that confident that we would be able to pull it off. But actually, we have learned so much and the impact has been incredible. Part of that impact was about reconnecting people. It was about reconnecting teachers with their pupils, creating a shared interactive experience for pupils learning at home and for the smaller group of children who were able to still go into the classroom. It meant that teachers who hadn't had their whole class together could get together with them, but it also meant that classmates could enjoy being part of a whole school community again. And that shared learning experience we know is really, really important. Delivering digitally meant that actually we could bring siblings into that shared learning experience, and parents could be part of that shared learning experience. And digital allowed us to connect in ways that we couldn't do when we were delivering exclusively face to face. In fact, in some ways, the digital delivery was even better than the face to face delivery. You can see on the screen there a screen grab of a virtual parent session that we ran over the last 3 months. We've been doing lots of virtual parent sessions, and actually, they've been great because parents can come to them. It's more convenient, they don't have to leave their home. We know that families are incredibly busy, and it's sometimes difficult for them to go to physical events. So, online, it's possible for them to sit down and be part of learning about the internet legends and also having the opportunity to ask questions of our experts. And that's been really, really important. And then Google launched a dedicated parent site so that parents have got further resources after the parent sessions that they can go away and access when they need them. And I would say that actually the digital parent sessions have been even more successful than our face-to-face ones were. The other thing that we've been doing that I think is incredibly important and has meant that the programme has landed well is spend lots of time listening to professionals, training teachers, working with local and national organisations to really understand what the issues are in local communities. And by doing that, we've been able to adapt some of our resources and really respond to what families need, because we know that families are not an homogenous group. Different audiences need different things. And listening to professionals and working collaboratively allows us to get that right. So it's only been 3 months since we reimagined the Internet Legends programme, but I think it's possible to already say that we've learnt a lot. And some of what we've learnt, I hope we will take forward. We know that online isn't the complete answer any more than offline delivery is always the best way. We recognise that digital has brought real opportunities to this education programme. We've been able to connect families, we've engaged parents, we've delivered learning, and we've reached a wider audience than we were doing, and that's very liberating. But we do still need to remember, as you can see from that picture of the lovely little boy on the screen now, that it is still important to have those offline resources and experiential learning that gets kids writing things down and drawing things. That's a very important part of education. And so digital can do an awful lot, but we also need to find ways to work together to make sure that that offline experience is there as well. So what I hope the Internet Legends will continue to do is to evolve to blend the best of digital delivery with face-to-face delivery and physical delivery, whatever the crisis throws at us next. And we're really looking forward to working with Google to make sure that that happens. Thank you so much for listening. There's an email address coming up now. That's got our email address. It's also got a couple of web addresses so that you can go and have a look at some of those resources that I've mentioned. And do please follow us on Instagram and Twitter so that you can keep up with what we're doing over the summer as this programme continues to evolve and continues to reach families. Thank you so much for listening.